Great.
Hello. Hello, everyone. Welcome. We're here
Welcome.
for session 2 of our
Yep.
Nonprofit Management Institute on board governance.
Yep.
I'll turn it over to you, Lisa, to give a quick welcome.
Yep. As you continue to let people in and people get settled, I hope you have or will get your second, third, fourth, or fifth cup of coffee as we get started today. Hopefully everyone's ready to go to continue our learning. Again, like Rebecca mentioned, welcome to day 2 of the North Carolina Nonprofit Management Institute. We're going to be going over board governance today. And on behalf of our executive director who couldn't be with us today, she also sends her best wishes for a great day of learning. Before we proceed, and we won't keep you as long as our first day, but I'd like to send a special thanks out once again to our sponsors, to Triangle Community Foundation, the Guilford Nonprofit Consortium, and Duke Continuing Studies that are our sponsors for the North Carolina Institute. Thank you, Leslie. So let's move on to our agenda for today. Like I said, just like last week, it's packed with information because, of course, first we'll be going through your capacity assessment. Hopefully everyone had a chance to complete that and to get the results and findings that I believe has been emailed out to each of you. And Dr. Palmer will take the time to go through them with you today. After that, we'll move on to board governance and all the duties and expectations, financial management, accountability, composition, and bylaws. Again, remember, this is a surface level information. We won't be doing deep dives into all of them because, again, this is a broad scope of board governance. If you have any questions, and of course, always ask them during our sessions. And as usual, the recordings and everything will be sent out to you after our session for today. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it back over to Rebecca to go over a few housekeeping quickly, and then we'll move on.
Thanks so much, Lisa. Quick reminder about our safe spaces to brave spaces. We are encouraging everyone to participate as fully as you're able. We also want to urge everyone to seek first to understand, not just to be understood. Respecting the humanity of others and perspectives of others is really important to the work that we do here. We also all sort of enter into this unwritten agreement that we'll take responsibility to go ahead and demonstrate a collective commitment to EDI, and that's sort of what we're all striving for in our work, both as a group and also independently. So that's that. We know that you all will adhere to all of that and help build a space where we all feel comfortable to share and to share freely and openly and be accepted for our perspectives. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and pass it off to you, Dr. Palmer.
I have to unmute first. Well, good morning, everyone. Hope everyone is doing well. We are back today for our second session as it relates to nonprofit management and the Nonprofit Management Institute. I wanted to just kind of start off with a little bit of dialogue, or you could use the chat as it relates to our new topic today. So kind of get geared up for that. But I also want you to reference, and Rebecca's going to come back and talk about the Facebook group page. There was a item noted there for you. And so what we'd like you to do is to share any best practices related to board governance, any best practices related to board governance. And Rebecca, I think I'm going to actually turn it back to you with the poll.
Sure thing. Let me go ahead and open this up for you and I'll share my screen. Thanks to so many of you for hopping on the Facebook group. I saw 2 or 3 new folks who were asking to join, and I'll get to those and admit you all. Oh, looks like Leslie's got it pulled up for us. Thank you, Leslie. We had put out a poll in advance of today's session on board governance to ask sort of what practices have worked for you to help ensure an engaged, more active board. And it looks like a lot of you, 50% of those that responded, looks like we had 8 people vote on this. Asking them to do something specific related to their strengths was something that a lot of you have used to really get your board members engaged. So feel free to use a reaction if you agree with that. The reactions are down below. You can give a thumbs up or a clap or a heart. We also, right behind that, we've got making time for their interaction with staff. Making those connections with staff members can be really helpful. And then 12% with onboarding and orientation. And so feel free to add some more to the chat if you think of ones that maybe weren't on this poll. We just gave a couple of ideas or examples. Would love to see what other folks have found has been really helpful for them when it comes to board governance or board engagement, and really helping to encourage that. Thanks for participating. We really love to see you all joining the Facebook group, introducing yourselves. This is a place where if you have follow-up questions from a session, it's a good idea to post them there because we can respond to those. Folks can also chime in. We want this to be sort of a collective group and not just only the center posting. So we'd love to see all of your activity on there. Thanks, Leslie, for sharing that.
All right, thank you. So as we kind of move into our new information, I would like to just kind of pose just kind of reflection question. And the question is, and if we could go to the gallery, the question is, what do you remember from the last session that is especially clear to you? What do you remember from the last session that is especially clear to you? And you could use the chat or you can unmute yourself and then definitely tell us who you are. We are going to do a little bit more of an introduction in just a minute, but what do you remember from the last session?
I think the thing that sticks out to me the most was being more proactive versus reactive. Remember when someone said that, and I thought that was very true, because sometimes we get so busy doing that we are reacting versus being proactive, and making sure you take a pause during the day to find out, am I being proactive or am I just reacting to everything that's coming at me? So I thought that was really important.
Okay. Anyone else?
This is Sadie Blue. For me, when we did this exercise around build, thrive, and sustain, I was very shocked and continue to wrap that around in my head, because some instances we're not where I thought we were once the measurement was done. And I was relieved to hear that sometimes that's where you are and you have to pull back and give yourself permission to be okay with, let's not necessarily start over, but be okay with there and then figure out how to build forward. So that was really impactful for me.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I have to agree with that statement. It was, even though our nonprofit's been around for a really long time, there's still a lot of room for growth. And that's not only okay, but that will keep us going, to continue to learn. And it pointed out the things that we need to get better at. So.
Good. Did anybody get a chance to take a look at the resource we provided, the nonprofit life cycles? I'm not suggesting that you had to. I'm just curious as to if anyone had a chance to take a look at that, because aligning where we are in terms of our principles and our current management condition as it relates to capacity, and then kind of looking at where we are as a nonprofit in terms of the life cycle. That's a really, I think, helpful, just kind of analogy to make, to put it in perspective. I think it was Julie that just said, just because we've been around 100 years doesn't necessarily mean that we are necessarily where we would like to be. Things do change, and so that's important. Anybody else, what you remember from the last?
Gary Thompson from Family Room. What really stuck out to me was how structured you guys have it in it. the measurements are very defined. And I love that. All right.
Mhm.
Because as a team, we can go over, all right, let's assess how is this department going and how is this area, program going. But to be able to have that so clear and concise, like these are the exact things that you should be doing.
Mhm.
It was overwhelming at first, but kind of comforting to have that on paper from people that have gone before us and done it before. Yeah.
Mhm. Mhm.
And yeah,
Mhm.
yeah, that was one thing that really stuck out to me.
Nicole, I see your hand.
Yes, ma'am. Good morning, everybody. I am, first of all, I want to say thank you for having this. And I'm new to the group because we had a transition in our organization. So I will actually be taking the training and I wasn't here last week. So I'm listening to everyone. I'm just kind of getting a feel for what was happening last week. But I did want to see if the life cycle can be shared again. Maybe I can, or is it the Build, Thrive, Sustain life cycle?
It is a link to a book, and team, can we put that link possibly? It's an Amazon link, Nicole,
Okay.
and it's the life cycle of a nonprofit. We'll try to share that with you.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Sure, and thank you for just giving us that insight. Thanks.
I liked when we had when we got the email back of everything that we had checked and gone through. And then I sort of agree with Carrie. It was a little overwhelming when I got it back and thought, goodness, did I check all of that really? But to a degree, we have a lot of wonderful volunteers, and it's like, please just give me something to do. And they're very qualified people and accomplished people. So, I think sometimes you can kind of sort of look at what you've checked and what's needed to be done, and how can you engage those volunteers, like the survey you just showed, engage those volunteers into really buying into the foundation and doing good work and helping, because I don't know how many people have great big staffs. There are 3 of us. So that are like the paid worker bees, but so to be able to use, we have a very large volunteer base, and then even with that, as you all know, that you have about 15% of those that you can rely on to do what they say they're going to do and get it done.
Awesome, thank you. Thank you for sharing. Lisa, are there any items in the chat that folks were sharing as far as what they remember?
Yeah, I think you've hit a lot of it. A lot of people were saying, understanding the nuances between Build, Thrive, and Sustain. They agree with depending on where your agency is. Similar feedback.
Okay, thank you.
You're good.
I wanted to share that, if you can hear me. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. I wanted to share that the statement that was made that a nonprofit has to be run like a business. And I think sometimes, especially with us, with the staff, we get so involved in the mission that we forget that it is in fact a business that has to have a profit in order to sustain itself. And I also volunteer in a community organization, and I've been trying to get them to realize this is a business. It's not just a nonprofit. It's not just a community organization, and we have to operate, like I said, at a surplus in order to survive and to sustain itself. So I think sometimes being able to communicate that, especially to the staff in a non-offensive way, is important.
I also wanted to add, thinking about staff specifically, how powerful it was to go through this assessment on my own, but also how powerful it will be for a team and for us when we're creating our strategic plan, when we're doing evaluations for staff and evaluations for programs, how powerful it will be for us to have common language and common standards to guide us. So I think this is going to be really neat for our staff as a whole.
Great, thank you. Well, this is always a very important part to begin our sessions, once we get going, to just take a minute to pose the question, what's very clear? What do you understand? You know, what was your takeaway from the previous session? As we said last week, we build upon each session and we connect the dots to each of the management functions that we're going to learn about, practice, and enhance our knowledge. And so this time of just kind of thinking back, because it's several days since we were together, and I know the nonprofit world really well, and I know a lot has happened since last Tuesday morning. And so, so we'd like to kind of take a minute to just kind of think back to what we did the previous week, and just kind of have a little bit of feedback from you as to kind of where you are with that information that we covered previously. And so as we move into our new information, we do want to take time to do some introductions. We have about a little over 50 of you participating in this institute for this particular cohort. And so we do like to try to, over the time that we're together, to become more familiar in knowing who it is in the classroom, so to speak. And so we're going to do a little bit of that this morning. And so I'm going to turn it over to Rebecca, and she is going to kind of walk us through some introductions.
Yeah, sure thing. Thanks, Dr. Palmer. Great feedback, everyone. Thanks for being brave and sharing in the chat and both with your audio. That's wonderful. We love to see that. Real quick, we're going to try this annotate feature again. And we're looking forward to having you all look at this map and using the annotate feature, which along the top of your screen, give me a thumbs up if you guys can see the annotate under view options. Oh, I got a thumbs up there from Christina. Thank you. Go ahead and open up, click on that. You'll see at the top of your screen, view options drop down. You'll see annotate is the third one down, I believe. And you want to go ahead and there we go. Go ahead and find a stamp. It's the fourth one over. You can choose yours. A lot of people do like a star or a heart or a little check mark, whatever you'd like. I see them populating in there. Folks showing us where you're based in the state. This is always one of my favorites.
Mine's not working.
Oh, sorry. Where are you,
That's okay.
Angie?
Cherokee, Graham, Swain, and Clay, all the way over here to the left.
Okay. I'll go ahead and add a stamp for you, okay?
Thank you.
Uh-huh. There we go.
Wow.
There we go.
I'm just checking this out.
Meade County, nice. Oops, somebody's
got a
erasing.
lot of-
Yeah, all over.
Yeah. I see Chatham County in the
County, yeah.
chat. Yeah.
Yep. Go ahead and add that in there as well. Beautiful.
And I see
Nice.
Alamance County from Michaela. Let's see, I see Brunswick from Deborah. Those are in the chat.
Mhm.
Cumberland. Pam,
Yes.
Pamela, did I also see in the chat where you had ordered the book, The Life Cycle? Did I see that? Okay.
That was family, yeah.
We have some of us who are not even in North Carolina. No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding.
Oh, I see some X's going across those that are outside of the state.
Yep.
That's awesome. Well done.
Yeah.
It's nice to see where folks are tuning in from.
Great.
I'll go ahead and clear all of those.
Okay, thank you.
And you all can close that annotate and we'll continue on.
I see
Thanks for
Johnston
participating.
County.
Sorry,
In
I
the
got
chat.
kicked out. I got kicked out from Columbus County. I don't know.
Oh, okay, okay.
Sure what happened.
Great, great. Thank you all so much. We'll do introductions a little differently each time, and that way we can continue to kind of get to know who's here. Feel free to communicate with each other one-on-one, because you can do that in the chat if you want to pose questions. Or I think there was someone who said they were from Rowan County. They wanted to know who else was from Rowan and maybe connect. So someone can't get the annotate to stop. I don't know. So
Little X next to it, I believe, little red X in the box that I saw. Yeah, it's a little red X all the way to the right.
Yep, there's all the way across your toolbar for annotate. You can click on that and that toolbar will go away.
okay.
That found it.
Great. Okay, Rebecca, are we all good? Awesome. So last week we shared with you our capacity building framework here at the North Carolina Center for Nonprofits. And so in thinking about what we discussed and what we reviewed, we talked about and shared and also went over our principles and practices guide. We talked about the different principles and took a look at those, discussed the management conditions. Some of you referred to the capacity assessment that we did. We did a mini one, MINI, and then we did a more extensive one. And then we also reviewed and covered our practices. In the chat for me, how many principles are there? Just put it in the chat for me. How many principles? Great. Right, 12. So we have 12 principles, and we are covering 6 of those principles in this Management Institute. How many practices do we have? Great. A lot.
A lot, I like that.
Oh my goodness. Amen to that. Yes, we have 216 practices, 216. How many management conditions are there? And what are those management conditions? It's like watching a movie reading the chat, right? It goes from scene to scene, person to person, in terms of that. Awesome. 3 management conditions: build, thrive, and sustain. And as I mentioned before, we did like a mini capacity assessment to learn more about just the frames and how they work. And then we did a deeper dive, and we had each of you to complete your own individual assessments. And basically what we were doing was identifying what you would like to work on, let's just say within the next year, or how would you like to enhance your capacity kind of moving forward. And we want you to, I know you've gotten those results back, and we want you to reference that as we move through each of these management functions and we learn more. We want you to be able to check off some of those practices that you mark that you'd like to work on. And because that's the whole purpose for us doing the Management Institute this way. And so in terms of the principles guide, all this information is included. Each of the principles, each of the all the practices that go with each of the management conditions, and then kind of an overview of the primary principles. So all of this information is contained in our principles and practices guide. So the next thing that we want to do is we want to spend some time reviewing our results and findings from the capacity assessment that you did. Before we jump into that, however, we want to go over with you how we describe capacity, capacity assessment, and capacity building. This is on page 84 in your workbook. It's further into your workbook. So I'm going to give you just a couple of seconds to find that in your workbook. Give me some reaction as to if you were able to locate that. Page 84. And I hope I have the page right. All right, I see thumbs up. Awesome, great. So when we think about capacity, we are taking into consideration the ability of a nonprofit to manage its growth and development, such that the nonprofit is moving towards acquiring its vision or seeing the vision manifest, but also in terms of maintaining that mission. So if I had to tell you something to highlight in this description, I would say ability. So it's our ability, it's the nonprofit's ability. I've heard some describe this also as agility too, like agile, like how agile are we in terms of what it is that we do. And in this case, we're talking about management. We're talking about nonprofit management. So, and so our capacity kind of shows up in terms of nonprofit management. It shows up in terms of our ability to manage the growth and development that we are experiencing. Capacity assessment. Capacity assessment is a process. We can understand where we are as it relates to our capacity by looking at both quantitative and qualitative information. For the purpose of the Management Institute, we utilize an assessment tool that is more qualitative. It kind of lends itself to be a little bit more qualitative related to the practices and identifying where we are in terms of management condition related to build, thrive, and sustain. And so it is a process of reviewing and examining where we are, that current management condition. And what we do once we do that is we try to determine the principles and practices that we need to work on to enhance our nonprofit, but also what we need to do in terms of enhancement for continued growth and development. So that's a mouthful, capacity assessment, right? That is a mouthful, but there are a lot of different ways that you can assess capacity. And you can incorporate unique ways that are relative to your nonprofit and how it functions and what its purpose is. Some information that you collect already can help you gauge where you are in terms of capacity. And so I always kind of like to help us to understand that there are multiple ways to assess capacity and to get feedback in terms of where we are in our ability to manage our growth and development. And the third area that we want to describe for you is capacity building. So when we say capacity building, we're talking about the implementation of strategies and techniques that we utilize for growth and development to achieve our mission and vision. And so capacity assessment, capacity building. Capacity, you know, what is it? Where are we in terms of our current ability and as it relates to assessment? And then how do we want to enhance? What do we want to build? What do we want to change? You know, how do we want to grow? And there are different tools that we can use. What's commonly used to build capacity is training, technical assistance, in some cases, professional coaching or executive coaching, and of course, consultation. So there are different ways in order for us to engage our nonprofits in building its capacity. And as I mentioned before, sometimes we need training, but sometimes we need support on site, helping us do what we're doing. Sometimes we need some inspiration and encouragement. And sometimes we need specific consultation on how to do something specific like strategic planning or something like that. So capacity assessment, and capacity building. That's what this Management Institute is all about. Management Institute is all about. Any comments about capacity assessment, capacity building. And if we could go back to the gallery, that would be great. Now, if you notice, I use the terminology describe as opposed to define, because we know that this work that we do in the space of capacity building, it is emerging and it changes and it's evolving. And so I tend to kind of lean more towards describing what these concepts are as opposed to being confined to a definition. Because when we look at each individual nonprofit, your capacity building, as I mentioned before, is going to be based on what it is that you need and the type of nonprofit that you are. Some of the nonprofits in this cohort today are unique to your community. There's not another one like it, right? It's the only one. Some of the nonprofits represented in this cohort are a part of another network or another entity or a group of nonprofits or a network of nonprofits. Some nonprofits that are a part of this cohort are a part of like an association or a national or international entity that you align with and that you are chartered with or a member of. And so it's important to kind of understand that capacity building, depending upon how your nonprofit is positioned, is going to be different. And so it's not like a one size fits all, which is why we start with assessing capacity. So we can be grounded, you can be grounded in where your nonprofit is in terms of capacity and utilize that as kind of a gauge as we move through the material. Lisa, do you have any comments related to any of that?
Of course, people wanting to use this with their board, I think it'll be a great tool and guide to use. Caleb mentioned they use the term coalition.
Yes. So it is very different, and we recognize that and understand that. The comment that was made about a nonprofit is an enterprise. You know, there is a business kind of element to what it is that we do, because we do need to yield a profit, right? In order for us to do the work that we do. It does take money. You know, even when a nonprofit is primarily volunteer run, it still takes money in some way, shape, or form in order for that nonprofit to do the work that it does. And I always like to remind us that our economy is primarily made of three sectors: business, government, and nonprofit. And so it's important for us to kind of keep that in mind. We provide a significant amount of employment opportunities for individuals. And so the nonprofit sector is a significant part of the marketplace in terms of how we do what we do. And most importantly, as you all know, I'm preaching to the choir here, we fill the gaps. We fill gaps in terms of needs that are present in our communities. We fill the gap to provide services and to enhance the lives of people, animals, the environment, you name it. You know, we have nonprofits that are addressing these issues partnered with businesses and government. And so that's important for us to remember. And we should not, you know, kind of hold back in those spaces because we contribute significantly to changing communities, changing our counties, as we saw the different counties in our intro. You know, we are a part of that. And so it's important for us to be healthy, successful, accomplishing the goals that you've outlined. As challenging as it is each and every day, it's important for us to remember that we are a part of our economy and our marketplace. And so in terms of that, one of the things that we want to do now is we want you to turn your attention to your individual capacity assessment results. And I just want you to take a minute or two and just kind of take that out. If you haven't had a chance to review it, I'm gonna give you a whole 60 seconds to do so. I'm just gonna go silent here for just for a minute and let you get that out and let you just kind of peruse through that. And then I'm gonna give you some more instructions. Sadie, is your hand up? Yes, ma'am.
So you said a mouthful about helping people to understand that nonprofit is a business. My question to you is going to be, literally, oftentimes we have these sayings or things to help people understand nonprofit. In community world, oftentimes people just see nonprofit as charity. Like when I'm working with communities and trying to help them to understand it's still a business. Is there a statement or something, without going into too much detail, that we could put forth, or something that you practice, that you put forth when you're in a community and you're trying to clear that up, right? So that people will realize we're not charity. We can't just give you everything. I mean, maybe I'm the only one that's challenged with that, but when you're in a community where people are ignorant and you don't want to hurt their feelings or feel like you're taking them to school. So do you have like those 1 or 2 lines or something you can point us towards? I'm sorry. I see people nodding their head with me like, yeah, that's.
Well, I like the way you just put it. We're not a charity. I mean, that's pretty much it. I mean, you know, I think we do have to help people understand that in order for us to run the organization, that it takes money to do that. And so while the name of these types of organizations is nonprofit, it doesn't mean we don't yield a profit. We still need that. I think in layman's terms, I don't see a problem with how you just said it. You know, we are public charities as identified by the IRS. That's a tax code, right? But in terms of the work that we do, it takes money to do the work. And so I think I don't see a problem with the way that you just said it. And think about it like this: how many times do we attend a meeting and someone says about our nonprofit, "Oh, I didn't know you were here. Oh, I didn't know that's what you do. Oh, I didn't," but we've been here 50 years. So I think the same is true in terms of having to repeat, you know, that we are nonprofit organizations and we do charity work, but it takes money to do that. So I don't see a problem with the way that you're saying it. Does anybody else have a phrase or a way that Sadie might be able to say that differently?
Hey Sadie, this is Jess. Here, let me turn my camera on. We do have this happen, especially because we have now, what SVA does is we're a grassroots intermediary. We support grassroots groups so that they have the resources of a nonprofit without having to do the work of being a nonprofit. So we fiscally sponsor groups and stuff like that. But we've opened a kind of community center. It's the People's Solidarity Hub in Durham, and it's for grassroots organizers and movement people to use. And because we've opened that space, we have a lot of people coming up and being like, "Oh, are you like so-and-so down the street? Do y'all do lunch every day?" And kind of like being mad about sometimes that they can't always see that the building's in use. It's not in use like 9 to 5 every day. We're trying to set up mutual aid, but people it's in a very under-resourced area. So what I'm trying to get my staff to say to people when they're approached is that we can't be everything for everyone. We have a specific, I put in the chat, the mission, vision, and values, but I know you're saying you're not trying to sound like you're lecturing people. So even just saying like, we have a specific purpose. We got one goal, we got 3 goals, and we can't be everything for everyone, is what I like to tell people.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to, Carrie, I see your hand, and then we're gonna move to our next area of work. Carrie?
Yeah, Sadie, that was a great question. We get, because we're a resource center for families that foster and children in foster care, it's all about stuff. I don't use this term here, it's not in our verbiage, but we give free stuff to people that foster. That's what we do. We say we provide for their needs, it's provisions. But a family that fosters and a child in care, they never have to pay for anything, but nothing's free. And that's what we try to tell our donors, like nothing's free. Somebody has to pay for this stuff. We provide it free of charge to families that foster. So that's kind of the verbiage that I use with our donors, but with people that call us with needs for children that don't fall into the category of what we serve, I explain, like, we are a nonprofit and our bylaws are very specific to the people group that we serve. And although the need is great out there and we wish we could help everyone, we have to focus on children in foster care. If we provided for all children in need, then we wouldn't be here for the children when they come to foster care. And that helps them to understand, doesn't meet their needs. So we're trying to find ways to connect them to other resources in the community, so that we always have that on hand when they do call. We can't meet that need, but have you called this person? Have you called this person? If it's a like-minded situation, like a child that needs clothes or needs a bed, that kind of thing. Yeah, does that help? Yeah.
Awesome, thank you. So everyone has your capacity results. Hopefully we've all had time to kind of get that out and to kind of take a look through. We are going to go into breakout rooms. And what we want you to do in your breakout room is to share with your colleagues any thoughts or anything surprising that you found in your results. So, or anything else that comes to mind for you as you look at those results. We want you to share that in the breakout. The breakouts are going to last 10 minutes. And so I'm going to pass it back over to the team to put us in breakout rooms.
Yep. All right, everyone good? Know what we're going to discuss? We got 10 breakout rooms. I'll respond to that message, Angela, in just a moment. We're going to pop you in there for 10 minutes and then we'll bring you all back. You're just to discuss anything surprising, anything that, any other closing thoughts about your individual capacity assessments. All right, off you go.
Your breakout room.
They're gonna all come pouring in here because their breakout rooms are closing up.
Okay, all right.
They'll probably, poor things, they'll probably be mid-sentence trying to share something. All right, here they all come.
All right, I think we are all back and we're going to move our work along here. We're only going to use the chat as a response to this question, and then we're going to take a break, and then we are going to jump into our new material. So if you would, in the chat, just kind of from your group, what was the one of the takeaways that people shared? Like after they got their results back and had a chance to look at it. Our team is gonna kind of tag team reading what's in the chat because we know that populates pretty quick. And then we're gonna, like I said, we're gonna take a break, and then we're going to come back and move into our new material. So I see a few items coming in. How important human resources is, job description, sharing the 360-degree feedback. Let's see, making sure we use some sort of assessment with the board of directors.
Gotta take bites out of the elephant.
Yes.
Going fast.
Need to make sure boards are diverse. Choosing things we have the ability to influence. Talked about our ability to touch certain, that one jumped up, I can't, they're going so fast. Our ability to touch certain things and influence, okay, all right. These are all in alignment with what we anticipate in terms of utilizing an assessment to benchmark where we are before we begin building capacity to assess that. Thank you for those of you who shared in the chat, awesome. And also in terms of, hopefully you got to meet your colleagues in the breakout, and you're starting to get to know who's in the space with us. Please utilize that tool, as I know you probably will, utilize that tool and that report to help you to inform your board, and we're talking board governance today, about what the capacity is, and making some recommendations and suggestions on how we can enhance that over time. We are going to be studying, I say studying, board governance today. And so that is our topic. We're going to take a break. And when we come back from that break, we're going to jump into our new material. If you would, when you come back for the break, if you could bring with you a few sheets of just kind of plain paper, a writing utensil. I'm going to have you kind of writing some things down and just kind of talking you through some of the first concepts that we're going to talk about. And then we're going to utilize that as we move forward. So Rebecca, about how much of a break, looking at the clock, we're in an hour already.
Yeah, let's go ahead and if folks can come back it's 10:27 now, if folks can come back at 10:35. Would that be okay? All right, we'll get started back here at 10:35. We'll pause the recording. We'll see y'all back here shortly.
Team, can we go back in the PowerPoint slide to the agenda? Just want to kind of remind us of what we're going to be covering today. I think it's slide 5. Thank you. All right, so board governance is our topic for today. And we're going to focus on 5 different kind of areas. One is the duties and expectations of a board of directors and of board members. The financial management and fiduciary responsibility of the board, and also fundraising expectations of a board. In addition to fund development, acquisition of resources, it's kind of all in bullet 2. Accountability and evaluation of our board of directors and board members. Accountability and evaluation can take place as a unified group, like the whole board of directors, but also on an individual basis. Composition of a board, and then the bylaws and legal compliance as it relates to the day-to-day operations and the expectations of how a nonprofit organization should function in terms of being in alignment with the bylaws and legal compliance guidelines. And so there is a whole lot that we could study as it relates to board governance. But we have selected these specific areas for the purpose of this management institute. And so we know that there will be questions that you have. Please utilize the chat. We want to make sure that we're leaving ample time to cover the material. And so there may be times where I'm moving along in the interest of time. So I want to apologize in advance. And I don't want folks to think that we're ignoring your comments or not responding to your questions. If you pose your questions, the team is all in. So we've got Lisa, Rebecca, and I do believe Leslie is still with us, yes. And so there are 4 of us, in this space. And so we're paying attention to the chat, and we'll do our best to either respond to you in session or outside of the session. So again, I just want to apologize in advance. I don't want anybody to think that we're overlooking you as it relates to the work that we're doing. Okay, so we're going to get jump started with board governance, and we can go to slide 15 now. So board governance, this is one of our principles. And so if you look in your handy dandy principles and practices guide, board governance can be found on page 7. And when we talk about and consider board governance, what we are paying attention to is the recruiting and retaining of a diverse board of directors. And we want our board members to be active members of the board. Now, I know that is a loaded statement in terms of that being our desire, but that is the goal, is for our board members to be engaged and to be active. There are some challenges with that. It's not an overnight thing, but that is a part of our focus. Whenever when we see a nonprofit organization performing, we want to see that. We want to see board members working with committees. And of course, the board provides governance and oversight. So we make sure that the day-to-day resources are available, that there's support with the executive director, and so on. And governance, we want to make sure that we are following our bylaws and that we are in compliance legally. And so when we say governance and oversight, that's a part of what we are recommending and what we would like to highly suggest as the goal or the focus. In addition, that boards are developing, that they are growing and developing, and that they're open to that, our board members. And so board governance, again, page 7 in our principles and practices guide, and kind of what our primary practice is there. To start this off, I want to take some time for us to kind of think about the board of directors as one entity, and then individual board members. So the board of directors as one entity, and individual board members. And so we asked you to take out, to bring back some paper with you. So if you would kind of take that piece of paper and divide it in half, portrait or landscape, it's whatever your choice. Just draw me a line, either a horizontal if it's landscape, right? Or vertical if it's portrait. So just, or did I say that wrong? Yeah, anyway. So divide your paper in half, and on either on the left side or the top part, depending upon how you divided your paper, I want you to give me an image, right, of what it looks like when your board of directors meets. So when you meet, give me a picture of what that looks like. So we've got 2 different spaces on your paper now. And in one of those spaces, I want you to just give me an illustration of when your board of directors meets, what does that look like? Use stick people, use symbols, just kind of give me an idea of what that looks like. What does that meeting look like? And we can go back to the gallery now. What does that look like? Board of directors, in terms of what that looks like. And then on the other part of that paper, I want you to give me an illustration of what you look like at that board meeting. So just singular, you as the board member. Now, if you're not a board member and you've never been a board member, then think of someone that you know. That's as close as I can get to that in terms of, so think of someone you know. Because if you are not a board member or you've never been a board member, then think of someone that you know or a board meeting that you have attended. What did it look like? And then select a person that was at that board meeting and put that on the other part of the page. So board of directors, board member. Next thing we want you to do is we want you to use the chat, okay? So the first thing we want you to post in the chat are words that describe that picture you drew of that board meeting. Just in the chat real quick. Tell us give us some words that describes that board and or that board meeting. And if you can hold your picture up, I'm leaning in, I could see it. If you can hold it up to your, Lisa, help me out, because I don't have my readers on right now and I have to.
Yeah, I see. I'm laughing, I'm chuckling at some of the words. I'm seeing empty, hybrid format, orderly.
Okay.
8 people around the table,
Mhm.
formal. I lead, they follow.
Okay.
That's interesting. Board members controlling the conversation. Structured, board's happy to be there. People are present but not connected. Interesting. Unsure of their expectations. Brady Bunch squares.
Oh my
If they're on
goodness.
Zoom. They say Zoom, Brady Bunch, that's funny. Clickish.
And that's a good point. I know some of our boards are still meeting by Zoom. They haven't come back in person yet.
Right.
So.
Right. Very casual, hybrid, no connection.
Okay.
Yeah. Interesting. A lot of talking to me to them, not as much the opposite.
Okay. Okay.
Good.
All right.
No, I didn't get a chance to see the drawings, but I know you did.
Oh, okay. One more time. Can you all hold them up? And you, we can look at each other's too. So I'm just trying to scan. I see square tables. I see something round looking. I see, okay. All right.
That's a good artist.
Great. The one thing I'll say about our board of directors in terms of the personality of the board, if I could call it that, or the board culture. If there are aspects of our board culture, board meetings, or personality of our board that we want to change, this is important. It takes time. It's not an automatic. It's a cultivation that has to take place. So while we're going to share some tips and strategies today around board governance, it takes time. There is no immediate fix for a board of directors that you want to change. It takes time, right? And we're going to talk about some of those variables that come into play, because what I hear a lot of times from executive directors of nonprofits is, I don't have an active board. I don't have an engaged board. I want them to be more active. I want them to be more engaged. Or that's kind of the thread that we're going to be talking about throughout all that we're talking about today. And our Management Institute is designed to be participatory. So there will be times where we, as I said, we're using the chat, we're unmuting and all that kind of stuff. And we'll be also doing hands-on type work. All right, so Board of Directors, we've got our image, we've got some ways that we've described it. What about the board member? Give me an idea in the chat, and then you can hold that up too. What are some words or phrases that you would use to describe that board member if it was you, or if it was someone else, that board member?
Included, passionate.
Okay.
Unprepared, dedicated, unaware,
Mm-hmm.
very involved, confused.
On their phone too much.
much.
Ooh, I know it. Boy, do I know it.
Mhm.
Everybody's multitasking.
Last
You think we
one.
could have board members check their phones at the door? Well, they're on Zoom, so we wouldn't know, would we?
Mm-mm. Supportive.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Okay,
Helpful. Yeah.
good. Oh, and team, I just saw an unstable internet connection come across my screen. So if something happens, I am not gone. I'll be back. I just saw that come up, so I don't want anybody to be alarmed if something happens. Okay. So Board of Directors, board members, go with me in your material to page 31. So let's talk about just a little bit about kind of how we view a board of directors and a board member. So our board of directors is a governing body, right? In terms of our nonprofit. There are some specific legal and ethical responsibilities that our board of directors has to the organization. It is an advisory body. The board members, the directors, are selected, and we're anticipating that they're going to assist us, advise us, help make policy, and umbrella to govern and to provide oversight. The governance is in alignment with the bylaws and legal compliance. The oversight is in relation to ensuring that the resources are available for this nonprofit to function. So that's kind of umbrella, that governance and oversight. The board member. These are individuals who serve on the board of directors. They have a purpose. We're wanting them to contribute. We're wanting them to help us strategize, make decisions about governance and about oversight. And ultimately, we want to be successful. We want to accomplish our goals. We want to maintain our mission. We want to achieve our vision. And we need board members to be actively engaged in order for that to happen and to work and function in the best interest of the nonprofit agency. So these are the governing entities, the board of directors and the board members. Real quick, we want to poll the group. How many of you are either a current or past board member? And Rebecca, I think you're going to help me with that.
Yes, I'm gonna go ahead and let's see if I can find it here. Polls, here we go. All right, let me launch this poll. It says it's untitled, but it's board
Okay.
service. So we'll launch it and you all can respond.
Mm-hmm.
And we should see the answers populate. Yep, here we go. I'll wait till we've got at least 80% participation. Are you all seeing this populating or do I have to share it? Okay, you're seeing it, good.
I think you might have to reshare to see it populate.
Okay.
I think at the end, you can share it with us after it's closed.
When I end the
Oh,
poll.
okay.
Okay. So we've got 89% participated in the poll. I'll go ahead and end and we can show that to you all, share results. Okay, can y'all see now?
A lot of board.
Yeah, 45% currently serving. 24% have previously served. 18% have never served. And 12% have not served but plan or hope to in the future.
Angie, you have a question? Your hands up.
Well, question, comment. You know, I'm one of those that previously served on a board of directors, and I chose to leave that board because they were so unilateral. I mean, it was one person, it wasn't even on the board, that made the decisions. And if you didn't agree with it, or if you want to try something new, it wasn't heard of. And so I mean, instead of fighting the fight, basically, I chose to back away from it because it wasn't worth. Has anybody else ever experienced that? I mean,
yes. You're not alone.
Okay, all right, good.
You are not alone. So there are boards of directors that are not as effective, let me just say. And there are boards of directors that do not necessarily align with best practices, that we know. And so finding yourself a part of a board that, you know, at the end of the day, you decide that this is not something that you want to do, that does happen. And so will we be able to alleviate that 1000%? Probably not. But yes, it does happen. There should be some balance in terms of decision making. There should be a formal way in which decisions are made, et cetera, et cetera. So, so that is the best practice in terms of how boards should function. In terms of why do people serve on boards? I want to pose that question. We saw where we have some of us who have never served on a board. So it may be difficult as an executive director to oversee the management of the board of directors, not necessarily having practiced it, although there are some things that are fundamental and it doesn't necessarily warrant practicing it. But that is probably a little bit of an edge that you might have if you are in an executive director role and you have the responsibility of partnering with your board and collaborating with your board in order to do the work that is necessary in that nonprofit structure. So in terms of why do people serve on boards? What have you found? And if you would use the chat for me for that, that would be great. Why do people serve on boards? Why? Or why did you decide to serve on a board? And I want us to take a look at that because sometimes I think when we have a board of directors that's not as engaged or not as active as we want it to be, sometimes our thinking can go negative, you know, like they don't care or they don't really want to help, or this is a resume builder, or, you know, the kinds of things we say when we see that the board is not active or not engaged. Lisa, you want to see what we have?
A lot of mission and vision, passionate about the agency, a lot of mission. I think the organization does amazing work. Yeah, most of them connected to the mission.
So when we start making those accusations about our board and our board members, I think it's important to reflect and be reminded that oftentimes, more than not, individuals show up with good intent, right? They want to be a part of the mission. They want to see this organization move forward. And over time, the culture of a board of directors, it changes and it impacts the engagement and participation of board members. And so we want to give folks the benefit of the doubt, right? Now, if they've shown us that they're not going to participate, they're going to cause problems, they're not looking after the best interest, that's a side. That's a whole nother situation. But for the most part, when I'm doing board development work and I'm interfacing and interacting with board members, oftentimes their intent is for the good of the organization. And we want to kind of hold on to that as being our premise for engaging. As a board member myself, I am a busy person. So if I am on a board, I am probably going to do what I can do, yes, to support the work in a way that I have time to do so. What's the game changer for me is when that executive director says, Pamela, I need your help with A, B, and C. And when I get some specific instructions, then I'm going to get the job done. But if I get to just come to the board meetings, be present, be focused, give my time in that space, and I'm not necessarily asked to do anything in addition to that, oftentimes I'm not. That I'm busy. I am busy. And so many of my board member friends and colleagues are the same way. If there is something specific that is needed, please ask me. You know my skill set, you know what I bring, you recruited me, you onboarded me. If there's something you need, ask me. And guess what happens when you do? I'm active, I'm engaged. So sometimes I think that little tip makes the difference. Busy people often are the ones who end up on boards. Busy people often are the individuals who end up on boards of directors. So I think it's important to, again, to begin with the premise that as a board member, I have agreed to be a part of the work that your nonprofit is doing, and I am going to fulfill that commitment. But things are happening all day, every day, that might interfere with that. And so I think it's important to show up and say, I want to partner with Pamela. I want to collaborate with her. I want her to be engaged. Now, if I give you reasons to think otherwise, again, that's a side. Then that's a different scenario. But active boards and engaged boards, active board members and engaged board members, oftentimes, not always, but asking for something specific might be the game changer, that there's something specific. Now, what am I doing? Go ahead, Lisa.
Sorry, Dr. Palmer. Pamela put in here, which is a good point. Our board governance is in part legislatively directed. Sometimes those required positions are less engaged. This is a good point.
Absolutely. And guess what, folks? Sometimes there's nothing we can do about it. I mean, I know that's not what we want to hear. Sometimes there's nothing we can do about it. But there's always the option of firing a board member, if you can. When I don't meet the expectations that I agreed to, it's time for a conversation. Yeah.
We've done it. We've done it.
Yeah. Absolutely. Whoo, that's a whole, Lisa, firing a board member?
I'm curious to know, how did that go? How did that turn out? Who said that?
Who fired a board member?
Oh, Angie said it.
You know, when you're not following the bylaws and you're never at the meetings and you want to complain, you've got no.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, good.
Another part to that is, now, if it's your board chair, oh my goodness, that's a whole, that's another level, right? But if you can get the support of your board chair When you find yourself in that situation, that is very helpful. Because it then is the board chair is responsible for helping to engage board members, right? And so if you can get your board chair or the president of your board to help in those cases, then that's important. I want to cover something before we go to the chat, or I don't see any hands raised, but Lisa, let me know if you do. Duties of care, loyalty, and obedience. Go with me to page 32. These are standards. This is the standard. I, as a board member, have 3 primary duties: duty of care, duty of loyalty, and duty of obedience. When I sign up to be on a board, in your orientation, are your board members getting an orientation? There's that. In the orientation, minimally, this should be shared. This is fundamental. Every board member should be aware of what these primary duties are. Now, these are specific to your nonprofit, so you may have to add to the description. What does duty of care look like for your nonprofit? What does duty of loyalty look like for your nonprofit? What does duty of obedience look like for your nonprofit? When I am oriented as a board member, this is fundamental. This is fundamental. These are duties that are where all board members are responsible for. So we want to look after the legal and financial matters of the nonprofit. That's stewardship, that's duty of care. We want to avoid any conflict of interest. That's duty of loyalty. We want to want to uphold the laws and the policies of our nonprofit, be in compliance, make sure that we're incorporating what's in our bylaws. We want to make sure that's happening. Executive directors and board chairs should be working as partners. As partners. It is a slippery slope. It is a dangerous place to be when the board chair and the executive director are going in 2 different directions. That is difficult. I wish I had a one-size-fits-all for that. I don't. But the goal is for the executive director is to contribute to the nominating of board members, the recruiting of board members. Executive directors and presidents and CEOs of nonprofits are a resource to the board. And we have to make sure that we are showing up in that space so that we have board members that are in alignment with who we are as an organization and that are going to be able to contribute to our organization in alignment with these duties. Notice I shared, make these descriptions unique to your nonprofit. What does this look like for your nonprofit? What does duty of care look like? What does duty of loyalty look like? What does duty of obedience look like as it relates to your nonprofit? And I'm just going to give you, you've got this in your workbook. For those of you who don't mind writing on your workbook pages, or maybe you want to take out a piece of paper, not for sharing, but just for reflection. What is one duty of care that's unique to your nonprofit? What's one duty of loyalty? What's one duty of obedience? An example of this. Because if you recruit me as a board member and you don't tell me, if you don't tell me what my duties are, I don't know. Or if you don't remind me of what my duties are, I may not know. Or I may forget. Or I may get busy. So it's important for there to be that exchange. It's a two-way type of thing. It's 2 ways. I want to do one more. Pamela, I see your hand, but I want to cover one more piece of information before I go on to your question, or if you could pose it in the chat, that would be great. So our duties are very, very, very important, very important. If we could go to our slide deck, nonprofit organization chart. I asked you to bring back some pieces of paper, okay? So these are 5 different elements of what we see in an org chart for a nonprofit. I want you to draw an org chart using these 5 pieces of information. What should a nonprofit organizational chart look like? Because if we're gonna talk about board governance, we first of all need to know what we're governing, right? So what is the structure? So take these 5 pieces, take out your piece of paper and draw me an org chart. Pamela, your question. I see your hand or comment. I don't want to assume the question.
I just wanted to mention that I had an orientation last week actually with a new committee member to the board who's on my committee specifically. And she's interested in becoming a board member. And I had that level of conversation with her specifically about my committee. And I know that that's happening at the next level up with the board development piece with orientation as well. But I do think that that's a really important point, that you have to be very specific to what is your role of duty specific to this committee. Your job is to make sure that our grant programs are functioning and approved under the contract with Smart Start. That's your job in this committee. And we evaluate them and then we tell them what their performance is. That's what we do.
Yes.
And, you know, it was a really good conversation with her because she's been a board of an executive director, this woman. And so it was a very rich conversation with her. So I just wanted to mention that.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing. Everybody have the 5 items here. Let's go back to gallery. I want to continue with Pamela's comment though. This is the thing. You know, onboarding is so important, and how you orient me to your nonprofit as your new board member is going to contribute to how I engage and to the degree that I'm active moving forward. So if it's rushed, hurried, unorganized, that's the impression I'm going to get. So we have to make sure that when we're bringing folks on, that we are being very clear as to why we need them, and to continue to do that as we move forward. Board development and management, i.e. board governance, is one of the fundamental management functions of a nonprofit. As an executive director, that is a part of what we are responsible for in terms of our day-to-day work. All right, let me see those org charts. What you got? Just hold it up for me. Awesome, okay. All right. All right, all right. Oh, I see some interesting org charts. Okay. Awesome. All right, dun, 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 dun. Show the group what our org chart looks like, team. So when we're thinking about the board of directors providing governance and oversight, and board members are being active and engaged, sharing their skills, sharing their resources, sharing their talent, it is very, very important for us to know what it is that we're working with, right? What are we working with? So here is how we recommend those 5 areas or elements be organized on an org chart. We've got our board of directors. We had 4 committees, right? We got our 4 committees. We've got the executive director. We've got our nonprofit staff, and we have our volunteers. So in terms of just kind of thinking about when I show up and I've never been on a board before, this could be very, very helpful for me. That I kind of know how your nonprofit is structured so that I understand how it works. And I can see where I fit as a member of the board. So I think this is very, very important in terms of that. So the nonprofit org chart, as we are looking at and taking into consideration the different, the 5 different focal points that we were going to study today. And again, we are sharing some tips and some strategies around board governance, I'm going back to my agenda here. I want to make sure I'm following that. And so we have the whole board, the duties and expectations is where we are still kind of focusing on here. The board of directors, the duties of a board member, and in particular, our board meetings and attendance. In your material, if you go to page 33, go to page 33.
Dr. Palmer, let me know when you want to take a question.
Oh, go ahead.
There's a
Yeah,
good
go
one.
ahead.
They're asking, can you name typically one of the 4 board committees?
Oh, yes. Do you want to do that, Lisa, or you want me to?
Go ahead.
Okay, all right. So oftentimes you have human resource committee, program committee. Your executive committee is comprised of your officers. That is a very common committee. Officers meaning your treasurer, your secretary, your vice chair, your chair. And your committees are based on what your needs are. So I don't want us to think there's this cookie cutter kind of way of setting up your structure. Some boards have some standing committees that align with the purpose of their nonprofit. Fundraising committee, finance committee. These are all examples of committees. What I would say is that your executive committee, your fundraising committee, and your finance committee, those align with those oversight areas because we're supposed to provide oversight. And it's uniquely different depending upon your nonprofit. But executive committee is common, fundraising committee is common, finance committee is common, program committee is common, but not always. I mean, not all nonprofits have those because some boards are smaller. So committee structure is difficult for some boards. You can utilize board members and non-board members if your bylaws allow. You could utilize board members and non-board members to serve on committees. This committee work is a way to get me engaged. It's a way for me to be active as a board member. Was that the only question, Lisa?
I think one more, sorry. They're asking where the roles of treasurer, secretary, where do they fit? Because they may not be on the board per se, but where do they fit on the org chart?
The treasurer?
Secretary, treasurer.
That's your executive committee. So it would be one of your committees. Now, if you wanted to put it on the org chart where you had board of directors and maybe you have a line and you have executive committee, you could, but I would align it with the other committees. But your executive committee is your officers and your treasurer, secretary, and the like, those are your officers. Okay,
good.
Awesome. So what are the responsibilities of a board? Board responsibilities, page 33. Here is our checklist. And what we want you to do here is we want you to check off those responsibilities that are present on your existing board. Check off those responsibilities that are present, that are active, that you do on your, with your current board or the nonprofit that you're using as your point of reference for this institute. So you're going to check the responsibilities that you currently do as a board. I thought I saw a hand up somewhere, but maybe it went away. I thought I saw one.
Dr. Palmer, I have a question.
Yes.
When you discussed about letting go of a board member, is that discussed in the beginning when the board member comes on, what can happen in terms if they have to be terminated, what things lead up to that?
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
So that should take place in your orientation.
Okay. Got it.
That should, and we're going to talk about orientation a little bit later, but that should take place in your orientation. I'm only as responsible to what I know. If nobody tells me, then I don't know as your board member. Onboarding and orientation is so important. It takes time, but it's so important. And for those executive directors that are in this group today, when that doesn't happen and it goes south, it's not pretty. I mean, it's important to be upfront and very clear from the beginning. Now, there are going to be times where you're going to do the orientation and the board member might still decide they're not going to do what you hoped. And so sometimes we have to release our board members, and that's important. So as a point of reference, here we've provided a checklist of board responsibilities. This is for your use. You have this list and you can look to see those areas that are not present. You might want to incorporate those. Every board is different. Every nonprofit is different. Even nonprofits that are a part of the same network, your specific nonprofit is different. And especially the board, different culture, different personality, it's different. And so that's important to keep in mind. I want to get through one more thing, team, before we take a break.
You have a couple of questions as well.
Okay,
So
go for it.
You want that first?
Yes.
One person asking, how often should you review your bylaws? And then can you explain the preserving institutional difference responsibility?
Okay, let me take the first one first. What was the first question?
Bylaws reviewed, how often? How often should you?
Well, as often as needed. But I will say, it's a good annual thing to do, to review your bylaws to see if there are any changes. But sometimes things will happen and it'll force you to go to your bylaws and refer to them. And you may have to make adjustments while you're flying the plane. So it's good to review them and to have a time when you review the bylaws and update them. But also you may have to do it intermittently, depending upon what's going on. And what was the second part of the question, Lisa?
Can you explain preserving institutional difference responsibility? It's the fifth one from the bottom.
Got it. Okay.
I'm sorry.
Preserving yes. So what we're talking about here is sometimes our organizations are legacies. Sometimes our nonprofits are legacies, and that makes our nonprofit uniquely different than others. And so here, the board then has a responsibility of helping to preserve that legacy, or to preserve, here it's phrased institutional differences, but to be able to stand differently, if in fact that's kind of why our organizations were formed. So we have a lot of our organizations that pride themselves in equity, equality, social justice, those types of things. And so this aligns more with what it is that your mission is, what it is that your purpose is, what makes you uniquely different. That's what we're talking about there.
Okay, you're good.
Another way of looking at that, kind of a practical thing to do, your archives, maintaining your history, you know, storing that information in a safe place, that type of thing. All right. So that is our board responsibilities in terms of duties and expectations. Duties and expectations. We should definitely keep in mind that we are expected to attend our board meetings. We're expected to be in attendance, and board members should know that you're taking roll. And it should be in your bylaws if they miss whatever number of meetings that they might be invited to not participate or not be a part of it. So those are just things, those are gatekeeping types of strategies that kind of helps you not have to kind of manage these types of things when you have so much work to do as it relates to the nonprofit that you are representing here today. I saw a question about advisors, board of advisors.
Yes, they're asking, they have a governing board and 13 boards of advisors. The board of advisors are in the 13 county region. That's, can you address that or talk about that?
Can I get a more specific question? What would you like for me to answer?
That was Rhonda.
This is Rhonda Dean. I asked that question because the boards that I manage are really boards of advisors, and similar situations as far as what a main governing board would have. But I just wondered if there was any difference with how you would manage a board of advisors, because they technically don't really have bylaws, because whatever the board of directors sets is, you know, they control that. But we do operate very similar. You know, there are at least maybe 12 to 15 individuals on each one of these boards. I manage 9 of them. So I have the same thing with having, depending upon these boards, to bring in other board members, attendants. Their main function is to assist us with grant making. So each one of these, they really are, and I'll have quotes, community foundations, because that's what we consider them, but they all have their own grant making function. And I just wondered if there was any. I know we have committees, but I guess these are kind of like committees, but they're really boards of advisors. And I didn't know if there was any type of advice you could give me in managing those.
What I would say is that in that example, there are going to be some nuances that are just going to be present. I mean, there are just going to be some things that are going to be challenging, but yet you can be effective. And so there's some elements of that structure that is gonna kind of call for a real kind of direct, being as specific as you can as to what you need from them. Their accountability and the consequences of not being accountable are very limited. So in that role, there's some nuances about that are just gonna be. I mean, you're not gonna be able to probably change a whole lot of that. But you just have to figure out for each of those 9, what's the personality of each one, what is the best way to approach each one, et cetera, and kind of work from there. My answer is a very long one and I don't have time, but it is recognizing each of those 9, what they need, what their capacity is, when they're most effective, and then just kind of navigating it that way. But because of that structure, there are just some elements of that are just going to exist. And you have to just kind of figure out how to, although I think you know that already, but you kind of have to figure that out. That's a tough role to be in when you have that many and the accountability is very limited. You know what I mean? That's just a real difficult way of doing that. I would say strong interpersonal relationships being as clear and direct as possible, not getting caught too much in the weeds with each one. Make sure you're focusing on the task at hand. You know what I mean? Just to kind of be able to manage your time.
Yes.
Are there any other questions?
Thank you.
I think you're good. Oh, I saw someone's hand up. I think Andrea's hand is up.
Can you hear me?
No.
Andrea? Is it Andrea?
Hello? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, okay. It's my first time using this mic. Okay, you can hear me okay?
I'm
Yes.
plugging up my laptop, so we're good. I'm
Okay.
here, but I'm plugging up my laptop.
So I am the founder and executive director of my nonprofit. It's small. I'm still a volunteer. So when it comes to structuring the board and figuring out who's responsible for what, is that my responsibility to develop that and tell that to the board, or is it the board's responsibility to figure that out themselves and tell it to me?
Your structure should be in your bylaws. That's where you start.
Our structure is in there, but like, it's very generalized on who does what and who's responsible for certain things.
You have a, what is it? Oh my God. Roles and responsibilities. What do you call it? Job descriptions. Thank you.
Yeah.
Do you
We
have job?
but like I said, it's just very generalized, like, you know, the chair is supposed to manage the meetings and, you know. I mean, we can update it, but that's what I'm saying. Like, is that my job to figure out exactly what they should be doing and I tell them what they should be doing as the founder? Or are they supposed to develop this as the board and tell me because they're really supposed to be overseeing me?
So this is what I would say. I think your question is a very, I'm glad you're posing this question because it is a partnership. And so once we know what is missing, right, in terms of how we function, we determine that list. I hear you saying job description. I hear you saying the actual structure. I hear you saying in the bylaws, it's very general. As the founder, and now you have a board, you should be working together to build that out. Because oftentimes when nonprofits are started, the bylaws are very general. You know, they're not as specific. Then over time, you get some momentum and you start doing some work and you start to see kind of how your organization functions, and you can build out those bylaws to align with the way you organically function. There are some resources that specifically guide you, and some folks in this cohort have used them. There are resources that guide you on how to build out the structure of your board. But primarily the go-to place is to put that information in your bylaws. Bylaws are just that. They are the bylaws for the board of directors. So if the bylaws are limiting you in your ability to know and be able to see what it is the expectations are of the board, you just need to start building those out. And you do it in partnership with your board in your case, because you're the founder, you have the board, you're both already working, right, as it relates to this nonprofit. And this is just an area of capacity that you want to enhance. Yes. I see Cassandra and I see Carrie, and I gotta move on. If you could put your question in the chat, that would be helpful. Okay. So we're still at duties and expectations. We're gonna move into financial management and fundraising responsibilities. Okay. So we're gonna take a 5-minute break. Cassandra, when we come back, I see your hand is still up. Can you all put that information in the chat, and then we'll be looking at that. We can look at that unless my team needs a break too. We can look at that while you all are on break. And then I can be teed up to answer those questions.
Great. So I'll pause recording. We'll be back at 11:36.
Thank you.
Dr. Palmer, you're on mute. That's okay.
I was just rocking and rolling. I was going for it, Rebecca. So we had two questions before we went to the break. The one was, how do you get board approval and board make decisions? That should be in your bylaws also. How you vote, how you make decisions and all of that. Things do come up, and sometimes you and the board chair might have to make, and or executive committee may have to do something a little different, but it should be in the bylaws. Keep in mind, the bylaws are the laws, right? For the board and how it functions. So again, that's where that information should be. And then there was a question about what should a foundation have? Should it be an executive director or a president? Was that the question? I want to make sure I'm answering it right. Are you talking about the title?
Well, no, we had the executive director, a board chair, and then a president. The president has left. He had other duties. He's not even in the same county anymore. So the question was put to me is that if you have an executive director, but you don't have a president, does the executive director operate in both capacities? Do you need a president technically?
So this is how it should be. And then you can kind of go from there. For a board of directors, the individual that presides over the board is either titled the president of the board or board chair. And sometimes we use those interchangeably. So when someone says, I'm the president of the board, unless there is a title of president and CEO for the person who's responsible for running the organization, then they can use that title. Executive director or president and CEO are the two titles that you kind of see. If you're going to use president for the person that runs the organization, then I wouldn't use that same term for the person that chairs the board.
Okay. Got it.
Does that help?
Yeah, so your executive director, depending on how that board is structured, could, as opposed to be calling the executive director, they could be the president and CEO, or does that then, okay. All right.
So is it Kim?
Yes. Yes.
So Kim, you have to choose. Are you going to name the title of the person running the day-to-day operations? Is that title executive director, or is it president, or is it CEO, or is it president and CEO? You just have to choose what you want to call that person and title. Then you can decide what you want to, how you want to label the presiding individual over the board. Are they going to be the president of the board, or are they going to be the board chair?
Chair. I got it. Thank you.
You're welcome. I think that was all of my questions.
Yep, you're
Going
good.
into the break. Financial management and fundraising responsibilities. So we're going to highlight 3 areas: financial management, fundraising, and human resources in terms of the board and their role there. So in terms of financial management, we will have a specific session on financial management. We'll do a deep dive. But in general, as a board member and the board of directors, we are responsible for the oversight of the monetary resources of the nonprofit. And that means that we are reviewing financial reports. We are getting a financial update report whenever we meet. And we are in the know as to what the financial position is of that nonprofit. It looks different for each nonprofit in terms of what is shared specifically as it relates to the financial reports. We want to screen share with you what the financial statements look like. And basically what we're going to show you is an audit And then we're going to show you what those actual statements look like. In our financial management session, we will go through each one of those and explain them. So team, if we could go to the financial statements. We'll come back to the budget, but if we could go to the financial statement.
One sec while I pull that up.
Okay, so in the financial statements, what you're gonna see, what you typically see shared at a board meeting, minimally, a profit and loss statement, a balance sheet, an indication of expenditures, you know, what monies we've spent. That's fundamental. You know, real basic, you're gonna be able to show that and be able to have a report out of what that looks like. And so what we did is we went to this Big Brothers Big Sisters organization, and they do a really good job of laying out their information. And so if we go to the audit 2019 one, yes. And then does this need to be bigger for the team, for the class? Does this need to be bigger? Yes, they're saying yes, this needs to be bigger. So stop right here, come back. So here is a list of financial statements. These are some of the options you have as to what you can share at a board meeting or share with your board. This is a very common practice to share the current financial position, to share what the expenses are, and to share a balance sheet. So you can go ahead to page 3, 4. Let's do page 3, 4, and so we can just kind of, okay, so go back. So here is our financial position or balance sheet. So this is what this looks like. You can keep going. It has your assets, your liabilities, your net assets. Keep going. Keep going. That's statement of activities too. These are all, and we're going to share this link with you. Sometimes boards will see a report out on the cash flow, you know, like so what the cash flow looks like. Keep going. We just want you to see these, and we're going to share the link. This is a statement of financial activities, and I think this is functional expenses, and I think this is the last one. And the link is in the chat. We got our functional expenses. Keep going. I think that's the last one. I could be wrong. Yeah. So these are the choices that you have in terms of what you can share. Again, fundamentally, profit and loss and balance sheet. That's a good report out. And normally those are monthly. So you're showing them kind of monthly and month to date. We're going to do a deep dive on these statements in the financial management session. The budget. Team, if you could just show the budget. You make that bigger. Here's an example of what a budget looks like. And we're going to do a deep dive here too, in terms of explaining. So it has your revenue and it has your expenses. Okay. And then if we could go to the annual report. And this is for the North Carolina Center for Nonprofits. So nonprofits are expected to do an annual report. And this is another part of the work that a board does. The staff, you know, builds it and puts it together, but the board provides information as it relates to that. So we're showing you an example of the North Carolina Center for Nonprofits annual report. Annual reports look different. You know, it just depends on the design you choose and what it is that you prefer. The annual report also gives an update of the resources of how dollars were spent, but also your programs and your services. And we're going to share this link with you as well. We're going to also do more with this in the financial management session. So we can come back to the gallery. So what is the takeaway related to financial management? The responsibility of the board of directors and each board member is to provide oversight to that nonprofit. And so we are expected to be a part of the stewardship of the resources that come in. And so this is a part of that. Every nonprofit is different. And the tools that you use and the way in which you engage your board in the financial management of the organization is going to be different. It's based on what it is that you decide and how you want to move forward, and how you want to work with your board in that sense. So financial management, fundraising. Fundraising is another part of our responsibilities. Duty of care, duty of loyalty, duty of obedience. This is another part of our responsibility to help bring resources in. We will do a session on fundraising as well. So we're going to do a deep dive on fundraising. But it is the expectation that board members participate in fundraising. Some nonprofits expect their board members to give a donation. Some give a limit. You know, it just depends on your nonprofit. There's no one way to do this, but the expectation is that board members will help fundraise. That's an expectation. The other element that's a part of the financing is making sure if you are a nonprofit that has employees, then we also are making sure that there are resources available for our for the nonprofit, so that it can employ and it can make sure that there are people on staff. So if we could go to the slide for human resource. Again, keep in mind, these are topics that we are going to cover in detail. So I don't want you to think that we're leaving anything out. But in terms of the board, this is what you're responsible for, board members. So we want to make sure that we highlight equity, diversity, and inclusion. This is a principle in our principles and practices guide. And you can find that on page 9. So equity, diversity, and inclusion is an element of bringing on people to work in the nonprofit as it relates to human resources. Another part of human resources as it relates to the board is the recruitment and retention of board members. Recruiting and retaining employees, I said that before. Board of directors and board members are not responsible for supervising employees. Not responsible for supervising employees. That's crossing the line. When you have a person in the executive director position of that nonprofit, that is their responsibility. And you may very well have an HR committee that serves as an advising entity to the executive director, but they are not supervising the staff. And when that starts to happen, you want to mitigate that. You want to try to reduce that. And help your board to understand that that's not their role. And that's an important piece of information to share in orientation, because sometimes board chairs and presidents, they get it confused. They think their job is to supervise and run the operation, and it's not. Professional development of staff and board development, that's another element. And just overall building capacity of the nonprofit. The board should be a part of that and wanting to see that happen. So in terms of funding human resources. In your material, I want you to go to pages 35, 36, really 35 through 39. 35 through 39. And I want to just tell you what we've put in this packet for you.
I am liking page 36.
Good, good. So what we tried to do here is to provide you with some tools that you can use. On page 35, you have, I've been talking oversight and governance since this conversation started this morning. And so here we have a little bullet sheet to kind of give you some examples of that, okay? And we are in our accountability and evaluation, right? So that's where we are. When you get to page 36, I don't know who gave that shout out, but when you get to page 36, thank you, Angie. You have some specific descriptions here to get you started. In terms of thinking about what these job duties and responsibilities are. Again, each is unique and different to your nonprofit organization. We have here the board member, we have vice chair, we have committee chair, we have secretary, we have treasurer, and we have a resource at the bottom that you can get additional information. So in terms of the job description, so that's important. Board of directors versus executive director. I love it when we get to this part around board governance because this is what we typically have been saying all the way up to this point. So this kind of gives you some handy dandy tools that you can refer to. So the board of directors versus the executive director. There is a difference in how each of these function, right? And so we want to make sure that we keep in mind is that the board creates policies and the executive director carries those out in their day-to-day work, in the day-to-day operations. The board sets the guidelines and procedures and makes policies for the nonprofit. The executive director makes all the decisions about enforcing those policies. That's important. The board makes decisions that affect the entire organization, yes. And that executive director is responsible for managing all of that. That is important to understand. Again, this is a good piece of information to share in orientation. So kind of keep that in mind. Board chair description. We've provided you with some information there so that you have a list of, it's kind of an extensive list of what the board chair's responsibilities are. And so there's a job description there. And then when you get to page 39, this is probably one of my favorite pieces of information to share. Because again, sometimes when individuals have not served on boards and they find themselves in the president or chair of the board role, they may not necessarily know what that means. And oftentimes it's interpreted as if they run the place, but they don't. So here are some specifics around there. The board chair's purpose and the executive director purpose. So this is important. When the terms change and you change and switch off who your board chair is, this is a good piece of information to orient them to so that they know what their responsibilities are. When you get to the last thing then that's not on your list here is strategic planning. And team, we're just going to stay here in the gallery. You can go back to the gallery. We don't have to shift to that other doc. But strategic planning is also a part of our work too. And so again, accountability and evaluation. That's the umbrella focus here. And all of these materials and resources help with that. Jess, I see your hand.
Oh, thank you. The question I have is about a board that I'm on, not the job that I'm here in this training for, but a board that I serve on. And the organization itself has always had a flat structure. it's very frustrating to me, and I'm the only person on the board who wants there to be an executive director. Is this, what do we do? Is that even a legal formation? There's no boss. Everybody is supposed to be, like, there's no staff boss. There are paid staff, there's 6 paid staff, and nobody supervises anyone else. They're all responsible for themselves. So what keeps happening is the board has to step in and is essentially supervising employees because there is no supervision whatsoever, and there's conflict happening and all this stuff. And I just got pulled back in. I was on the board 6 years ago. I took a 6-year break and I'm back on the board, and this is still a problem.
Is the founder still in the scenario?
No.
Okay, so then is the board okay with how things are going? Does the board as a whole want to change?
No, people are not okay with how things are going, but they're still very attached to the idea of a non-hierarchical structure. They think it's like the only way to be cool. And I'm like,
well, what I would say, Jess, is this. Then you have to deal with the you have to deal with the impacts of that. I mean, either you want to change it so that you don't have the chaos, or you don't. And if you don't want to change it and have a go-to person in the executive director role, that's kind of what you have to live with.
yeah. So is that, I mean, have you ever been a part of an organization that had a flat structure?
I am familiar with organizations operating in that fashion, especially the new ones, until they get to a point where they can hire an executive director to fulfill that role.
Right. Okay.
It's a decision that your board has to make.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Okay. Thank you.
All right. Is there anybody else? Is there another question? Can we get to Lisa? Do we? What if the ED is the president? That went away so quick.
Yeah, what if the ED is the president? No one else on the board is involved enough to take the president role yet. Sherry was asking that. You're on mute, Dr. Thomas.
What is the question?
So I'm the founder and executive director. I'm also the president of the board. And we tried switching that to slowly get me off the board, because everyone keeps saying that the ED shouldn't technically be on the board. Not for legal reasons, but it just doesn't look good. But no one on the board is involved enough with the day-to-day operations of the organization, or they don't feel they are, to take that role of president. So for the year that I wasn't the president, I was still making the agenda for the meeting. I was still calling the meetings. I was still leading the meetings. I was still doing the role of president, but it was not the title.
Mm-hmm. And so what is your question?
Is that okay? I mean, everybody.
No, that's not okay.
I didn't think so. I didn't think so, but I don't know what to do about it because, yeah.
Well, it's not okay. I think an approach to it would be for you to recruit a board member that would be willing to be the chair. And we just shared that being the chair does not mean you run the organization. That's the biggest difference that I heard in your example. So currently, they are not exercising a best practice as a board. And so change in behavior takes time. And so it sometimes takes a minute, especially when you're the founder. I founded a nonprofit as well. When you're the founder, people will defer to you. But if it sounds like they highly respect you, so make an executive decision. Make an executive decision and say, I need you, Pamela Palmer, to serve in this role and help us make this transition. I mean, they respect your opinion. They respect that you know what you're doing, and all of that. Use that to your advantage.
Okay, thank you.
But that is something you need to change.
But Well, we set out in January that the goal of that was going to change by December.
I know. I
And
get it.
we just met 2 weeks ago and they're all like, we still don't feel like,
Yeah, well, just assign some, voluntold somebody.
there you go. Okay. I'm good at that.
Or volunteer somebody.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yep. Lisa, I saw you unmute. Did you have a comment?
No,
Oh, okay.
There was
All
a quick
right.
question, Dr. Palmer, that I want to make sure we speak to, which others may have, and it was about the onboarding and educational board member and what the duties and responsibilities are. Whose job is that? Is that the board president or the ED or both in combination?
If you have staff, it's the staff's responsibility to coordinate that. Now, you might include existing board members to help with that, but if you have paid staff, and especially if you have an executive director, they should be involved in that because they should care about how people are being onboarded. So I would say that's a paid staff responsibility. All right, are there any other questions?
Nope.
All right. So now let's do a fun activity. Here we go. Page 40. We want you to evaluate your board. We want you to evaluate your board. So there are 2 sections to this evaluation.
Is that 40, Dr. Pamela, or 41, page 41?
40.
Okay.
Is
Let me see, on my book, it says Executive Director Position Review Worksheet, and then the evaluation of Board of Directors is 41.
Okay, well then it's 41.
41, okay.
Sorry. It's 41. So the Board of Directors evaluation. And so we're going to give you some time to do this. You've got 2 sections. The first section, you're rating the board on a scale of 1 to 5. 1 needs improvement, 5 is excellent. Section 2, priority areas for improvement. And so we want you to spend some time on that. I'm going to go silent and let you work on that. And I didn't want to leave out section 3, sorry, but there is a section 3. We should take time to evaluate our boards, and the Board of Directors is responsible for evaluating the executive director. This is a tool that you can use. There are other tools out there. There are Board of Directors report cards, assessments and surveys. There are various tools that you could use. This is a really good exercise to have your board do once a year. You can do individual board member self-evaluations as well. But this is a really good practice, and it opens the door for discussion around areas that you want to enhance. And then it doesn't necessarily call anyone out, so to speak, in terms of that. Sometimes we have to call people out, but it does give us if it's a scheduled thing, everybody knows it's coming. We're expecting that we're going to do this evaluation. This is a good practice to incorporate as a part of your board management work. So that's important. And so we give you kind of this tool, introduce it to you, let you use it a little bit to kind of evaluate your board. Angie, you have a question?
Yes. I personally like this, but I can see me handing this to my board, and because they think they're doing everything so fantastically when they're really kind of not functioning very well at all, not giving accurate feedback. Should they have should maybe this be something in the middle of a training session or mid-year to give them, especially, and I'm just thinking of my personal situation with because they're a little sketchy on the way they're organized.
Okay, so what I would say to you is maybe try to work and partner with the board chair and let the idea come from the board chair as something that you could possibly do. If that person isn't an option, then try another board member who might actually be the champion for this, as opposed to it seeming like it's being imposed upon them. Have one of their peers share it. That might be a way to kind of get to it. And then the other thing is, let them know how helpful it would be for you, and that it will help you better support them by getting this feedback from them. Those are some approaches you could take without it seeming like you're going to grade them or you want them to grade themselves or that kind of thing. So those would be some.
My fear is really that they're not going to be honest with themselves because they don't really know that they do have areas they're missing in. That's why I said, could you do a pre-training and then
you could
see how their differences change?
You could. Is it possible for you to either use those options I shared, or is it possible for you to just kind of ask and see, just to see what they say? Or would you all be open to doing this? And yeah,
One thing that we did, because we were worried about that, it was a couple years ago now, but we had the board do a self-evaluation for themselves and then do one for fellow board members, like not a specific person, but for others. And then we showed the stark difference in how well they thought everybody else was doing versus themselves. And again, for you, it might not make a difference, but for us, it did, because we felt like board members were gonna kind of increase how productive they thought they were.
Thank you, Charlene, for that example. And yeah, a combo of strategies may be the way to go if you're thinking that your board may be a little apprehensive, to actually doing this. But I would lean on the side of it will help you help them. You know what I mean? Like the more, if you could give me a way to pitch it, if you could give me some collective information about how you currently see our board, and for me to bring the executive director, to bring resources to help us, this will help me to be able to do that. That's a way to approach it. But if it's something new that you're just thinking that you're going to get some challenge or some pushback on, I'd just take baby steps. you know? That's a way to approach it. And so again, this is a tool that we can, and there are other tools out there. This is not the only tool. There are other tools out there that can be used for this purpose. Board composition. Do you all have recommended sources for board evaluations? Yes, and I'll let Rebecca refer to when we close out. Our website has resources on all of this stuff. There are resources for everything that we cover. Yeah, there are additional resources. We're going to go to board composition. And then after that, I have one more piece of information I want to share. And team, we may have to pick up a little bit with legal compliance. I'm going to cover it, but we may have to pick up on it a little bit at the beginning of the next session, just kind of FYI, as we're moving forward through this. And we are going to, we have an entire session on human resources. And so we will be talking about the executive director evaluation as well. So several of these topics, we're going to do a deeper dive in the topic specific sessions. So I don't want you to think that you're gonna miss something. Board composition. So if we could go to the slide deck on that. And there are three kind of areas. We've really been talking about board composition the entire time. If you reference the oversight and governance worksheet, that is a part of the board composition. Typically in your bylaws, you are going to see information about who should be on your board. Some of your boards have mandates. So in order for you to receive certain funding or offer certain programs, you have to have a certain makeup of your board. And so that's uniquely different for those nonprofits. The demographics and the characteristics of board members oftentimes are noted in your bylaws as to who should be on your board. The number of board members is in your bylaws. And we've already talked about the executive committee, but in your bylaws, there should be a section that describes the officers of the board, and that those officers make up the executive committee. So that information is in your bylaws. We're going to show you sample bylaws. I know we've been using that term a lot today as it relates to board governance. So if we could just pull up the bylaws, that will be helpful. Okay, and make that just a tad bit bigger. I want to point out, give me some reaction. How many of you have never seen bylaws before? You've never seen bylaws before, like you've never, ever. You don't know what bylaws are. Okay.
I don't see any hands up.
Okay. The oldest set of bylaws I've ever seen, they were bylaws that were written in 1924, like the guidelines, and then they redid them, and they were typed like on a you can see that they're typed on like an old manual typewriter. Those are the oldest bylaws that I've ever seen. That particular organization was started in 1924. But then like in the 60s, you could see where somebody took that and typed it. But bylaws should be reviewed. They should be reviewed and they should be updated. So I wanted to point out here, we've been talking about the officers. This particular section in the bylaws gives it a description of the president, the vice president, the secretary. Keep going. And then they give like a little disclaimer here that board members, officers are not compensated. And so the executive director is, but the board members are typically not. These bylaws also have a description of committees. And then the last thing in these bylaws are if there's going to be an amendment or change. So go back to the top for me. I just want to see, make sure there's nothing left out of there. These bylaws also give an indication of the agenda for the board meetings too. So, you know, just kind of, as you kind of look at, the bylaws, you can see where the things that we've been talking about in terms of the different sections. So bylaws are very important. And when you do an onboarding of a board member, you should share the bylaws so that they understand. Okay, and they should be reviewed and changed as needed. Okay. In your bylaws, you're going to have term limits. We can go back to the gallery. You're going to have term limits in the bylaws. And the bylaws also have a section on conflict of interest. So if you haven't looked at your bylaws lately, I think it would be good to do so, just to kind of better familiarize yourself with what's there. So the bylaws guide the activity and the work and the roles and the duties of the board of directors. So that's important to keep in mind. Let's see. Legal compliance. I'm looking at my time. Team, what do you think? Do you think we can do an overview of that? That's the last item for today.
Yes.
Do you want to do an overview and then we come back to it?
At least an overview.
Okay, so Rebecca, you want to take us to the legal compliance checklist. This is a great tool, by the way, because it helps you just kind of go down a checklist of being in compliance. But Rebecca, I'm going to let you pull that up.
All right, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen.
And a quick question while she's doing that. A question came up about, is it best practice for compensation for executive board members? She says it doesn't feel right to her, but she's new to the office.
Board members are not compensated.
So when you're talking compensation paid, but like mileage for travel, things like that?
Right, that's not compensation. That's
Okay.
that's paying, like if they go to a training, you might pay for that, or if you want to pay them for mileage, you can do that, but they don't get a paycheck.
Got it.
They are not contracted to do work for pay. Yes.
So for the legal compliance checklist, it's on our website under publications. Members of the center are eligible for a free download of a PDF of it. We update this annually. Non-members, you may purchase a digital copy for $25. And it goes through all the legal compliance sections, and you're able to sort of see if you fall under a certain category, sort of who is required to submit any paperwork. If there's a form, it mentions it, it'll have a link, and then it tells you how to do so and how often to do it. It gives you a schedule for all of the legal compliance aspects of a nonprofit. And then it does mention here too that there's an updated edition, which includes details on legal issues related to COVID-19. New state tax and employee health insurance laws and changes to employment laws and state grant reporting requirements as well. So I'll put a link for this page in the chat. I'll have that. Have any of you downloaded the legal compliance checklist and used it, found it helpful? Did you know that this existed? Did you know that the center provides this as a tool and a resource? No.
But I'm
So
glad to know that it's there. Thank you
Yeah.
so much.
The other thing to keep in mind too is that, when you purchase a download, anyone who's a member can download for free, but if you purchase a download, that download is good for your whole staff and your board. So you're welcome to share that with everyone who is a part of your organization, board and staff, to sort of keep tabs on what the compliance issues are and making sure that you are within compliance. All right.
And Rebecca, you want to go ahead and show them the nonprofit policy briefings, and that way they know. So in the state of North Carolina, we have a legislative relationship with our legislators, and the North Carolina Center for Nonprofits has a staff person that helps to interface with legislators. And Rebecca, I'll let you take it from there.
Yeah. So we'll have this coming up. These dates are from from the spring, but we'll be launching these again in the spring of 2023. And we do them in person within different regions. And our goal is to do them in person. It'll be sometime March, April, even into May of 2023. These are the dates from this past year. But the other thing I'll say is that there's David, who's wonderful. He's at our organization. But one of the things that I'll say is that you can look under public policy here at the top of the screen. You can go to public policy updates. We provide these to both members and non-members, so anyone can access this information. We started that back at the beginning of COVID. So you can sign up for the nonprofit policy updates that come out every Friday. And then you can actually click on a recent one there in, reverse cron here with the most recent at the top. You can click on the update, you can see it, you can share it. You can learn sort of what issues are coming up. And this is also a good thing to just kind of share with your board, so they're in the loop too, right? Because they have leverage that they can apply to, right? We want all of our board and supporters to kind of understand what issues nonprofits are facing and how they can help to advocate on behalf of nonprofits in our state. And so this is a great way to stay in the know about the policy issues that are coming up.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah. And I'll put a link for this in the chat for this page, so you guys can review this and also sign up for policy updates if you're not already receiving them.
Thank you, Rebecca. And so if we could go back to the gallery, I want to see if their team, if there are any questions in the chat that may have come up while Rebecca was doing that. I don't see any. I don't want to miss anyone in the event.
No, I don't see any specific.
Okay. So, wow, we have had a full day. Well, it's not a complete day. It's like half a day. We've had a full half day, right, on board governance. Please make a note of those areas that I shared. If you have additional questions, those areas where we have specific sessions related to those topics. Jot down your questions, because if you're like me, you'll forget, if something comes up, and then we can make sure, and or you can insert those questions at that time. We try to take note of that whenever questions are posed, because we know what's in the material to come. And so we try to kind of make sure we're connecting the dots there. Board governance and oversight. My goodness, we could have covered even more information. But we wanted to just kind of share with you, as we mentioned on last week, the fundamentals of these areas, and to begin to help you to think about how you might enhance your capacity in these areas. So if I could real quick in the chat, I'm looking at my time, team. If I really could quickly in the chat, get some sense of the group. Right now, you're feeling what? Fill in the blank for me. because we'll have a new topic next week.
Right
now you're feeling what?
Overwhelmed, hopeful, organized, motivated, concerned, overwhelmed, appreciative, full of information, empowered, educated, a lot to learn.
It's a journey, y'all. It's a journey. It's, you know, change does not happen overnight.
Yep.
It's one step at a time. What was that one? So overwhelmed, they're flashing up so quick.
So overwhelmed. I'm a doer and I want to jump off this call right now and implement what I'm learning. That's from Andrea. Thank you for your encouragement and not criticism.
Absolutely. Absolutely. We're partners in this. We are all partners in this. Awesome. Well, it was great. It was great sharing this time with you today. I am going to turn it over to the team. There are a couple things they would like to ask of you, and I'll see you next week for program design, management, and evaluation.
Thanks
Yes.
all.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Lisa.
Yes, thank you all again. I'm going to talk to my team about putting me between you and lunch, but I'll keep it short. All of the comments that you made earlier for resource information tools is another valuable reason that we would encourage you to become members of the center. Again, we have so much information that we can share with you, also giving help for you one-on-one if necessary. Thank you again for being patient with our breakout groups. Again, I know they're short, but we have to do that due to the intensity of the workshop. We do plan to send out a participants list to you all, so we hope that you'll continue networking with one another, helping one another. I saw some great questions to each other, asking questions, so hopefully you'll keep that networking vibe going on. And as always, please complete our session evaluation. That will be put into the link for you, because again, your feedback is very helpful to us on how we organize our future trainings. And with that, if you can see on the board, we have our upcoming dates with session titles. We have 4 more to go. We're moving right along. Rebecca, did you want to add something? Because I sort of cut you off, sorry.
No, yeah, I think you covered it. Thanks, Lisa. No, that's great.
Well, thank you all so much, and we'll see you next week. Go get some nourishment.
Thanks, everyone. Take care. Bye.